Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Inigo. I know it's been a while, but it takes a while nowadays for me to find any topic that I like to talk about for more than 5 minutes. The election and COVID and Black Lives Matter and the LARPing in the street between, the left and the right just doesn't do it for me. I like to talk about things that are a little bit more behind the scenes and kind of sets the tone for the mobs to freak out. So, what I wanted to talk about today are two things. First, real quick, what I'm calling a comedy of spies is the emergence of a new whistleblower in the Russiagate saga. Stephen Sackridge. I'll go with Sacharge. I don't know. Sackridge. Let's go Stephen Sackridge. He's popped out into the news. He was on Fox News on Sunday. And if you have been, if you're not a Russiagate believer at this point, because it's just blind faith that you would continue to believe that took place in the way that they said it did. Maybe you don't know Stephen Sackridge, but Stefan Halper. Halper is the quote-unquote FBI informant, the former intelligence academic who, is the beginning of this whole thing with Carter Page and Papadopoulos. So Stephen has come out, Mr. Sackridge, and is kind of spilling the beans on how this has all been made up. Halpert and so many others, he calls them the Cambridge Four, just four guys, washed up old intelligence people who are now working at colleges and needed something to do. Kind of wanted to become relevant again, and they set the stage for Russiagate and setting up Carter Page and Flynn and all this stuff. So the timing, of course, for Sackridge coming out is perfect, with more testimony coming this week. And what he did that is really interesting, and what I want to point to today real quick, is that he sat down and did an interview with Matt Taibbi, who quote-unquote disgraced former editor, journalist guy at the Rolling Stone magazine. I think Taibbi's been great over this whole time. He's a great writer. I just like reading his stuff, regardless of your political views and what we disagree on. So he has two articles up on his website. One written by Sackridge, where he tells his whole story, and where he actually states that he'll be releasing more and more writing on Taibbi's Substack. And there's also another article by Taibbi summing up his interview. So I'll link to both of them. But again, really interesting stuff. And what it does is it just continues to expose the Russiagate hoax for what it was, and it was just an attempt at bringing down a sitting president by the other party. I mean, it's pretty shocking. So check that out. I'll link to it again. It's a good read. Just read through it yourself and just kind of get yourself up to date, because the media is going to come after this guy and pretend that he's some kind of Russian agent and a fraud, and what he's talking about. So you'll have the background information before that takes place. The main story that I wanted to talk about today, though, is Belarus. We'll start with the map. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, and you probably haven't been, I was on Twitter the other day, and I mentioned this. I actually linked to an article from Moon of Alabama back in June about how the U.S. was working on another new color revolution in Belarus to install a favorable leader there. So I was on Twitter a couple days ago, and I went to trending, and all of a sudden Belarus had popped up, or Minsk. I think it was Minsk popped up as a trending topic, and I checked it out. And of course, I had forgotten that the election had taken place, I believe, on the 9th. And of course, the leader there, Alexander Lukashenko, who's been in power since 1994, right after the Soviet Union fell, won with 79% of the vote. And for somebody like me who knows a coup when he sees one, or an attempt at a revolution, a color revolution when he sees one, it had all the makings of what normally happens. Corrupt dictator, corrupt government person wins an election. The opposition declares that the election is illegitimate. People take to the streets. Way too organized for anybody who pays attention to realize, or to admit, or to ignore, really. Just like in Hong Kong, people who thought that was just organic are just out of their minds. And the Western media immediately hopping on and starting covering this revolution in a country that nobody in America really cares about, but just to build it into your consciousness that the regime in Belarus is corrupt, and they're a police state, and they're beating their own people. Look what they're doing in the streets. I'm sure we'll have a couple episodes on whatever the new NBC, Fox, ABC action show, like 24 or one of those shows is on. Belarus will now be a new American adversary. So what's actually happening, and going back to the article in June, and this was on the 16th of June, the article came out calling the new the beginning of a new attempt at a popular uprising revolution in Belarus called the Slipper Revolution. So instead of a color, they went with slipper. So this was the first reference to Slipper Revolution. It was also used on a Belarusian or Belarusian TV station. I think it's called Betsat, I believe. I might be pronouncing that wrong. .tv. It's a U.S. government-funded TV channel in Belarus. And then also on the same day, a bunch of newspapers that are very right, Western-leaning, started using it in their headlines. There you go. There it is. Belsat.eu at the bottom there. There's the TV. A Western-funded TV channel, TV news channel in Belarus. Bringing out the Slipper Revolution as a term. And then this, my favorite photo in the newspaper, Belarus Slipper Revolution sinks to stamp out Lukashenko. I just love that picture. This guy's got a mask on, he's not wearing it, he's smoking a cigarette, and he probably looks like the most Russian dude you've ever seen in your life. It was also mentioned, the Slipper Revolution, in an Atlantic Council foreign policy piece about NATO expansion into Eastern Europe. So, you start seeing it pop up. Now, going back before that, let's give some background on, not Belarus, but how you get to the point where the U.S. Is interested and thinks they have, and they think that it's a good time, or they have the right environment to install somebody that they like. So if you go back further to the beginning, like I said, Lukashenko took power in 1994. He stayed in power, and because he took on the power so early, stayed with a lot of Soviet-era policies. So, there's a lot of public institutions that are actually working for the people. But he did miss out on a lot of Putin-era capitalism and free market enterprise. And the reason I bring Russia up and when I talk about Belarus is they are very closely aligned, as you can tell from geographically, but also just going back. In 1995, they signed a deal called the Union, making themselves a union state, which kind of moves Russia and Belarus into more of a partnership where citizens of either country can move within borders and live. Russia subsidizes Belarusian oil, and then Belarus can sell some of that oil from a discount, and they can sell it to make some money. They also export a lot of heavy machinery to the West and for Russia. Now what has started to happen, and this has been going on for a while, pretty much the early 2000s and for the last decade, is as they're moving closer and closer to this union state, which of course would mean in reality that Russia has more and more control over Belarus than the strongman. Lukashenko has kind of drug his feet a little bit on some of this stuff. So the subsidizing of the price of oil is seen as some kind of leverage by the Russians that they can kind of just pull that off and take that away whenever Belarus gets out of hand. And they actually did that recently in 2019. And now Putin kind of tried to call his bluff and say, well, we won't be releasing we won't be buying any more of your oil or selling it to you at a cheaper rate. So in response, Lukashenko started courting the United States and the West to kind of piss off Putin. He started to use words like sovereignty and things like this, kind of scaring Putin that maybe he would move a little bit more to the Western side, just kind of playing both sides. Kind of like they did, Erdogan is doing in Turkey. Pompeo took a visit to Minsk in February, and prior to that, just so you have an idea, the last trip by somebody that high in the United States government was in 1994. So it's been that long that Belarusian, it's not been a hotspot of U.S. Intelligence or any type of relationship. There's now a new ambassador to Belarus, a U.S. ambassador, which, when you have an embassy pop up, the first thing that you think of is intelligence, CIA, and now the U.S. has a foothold in the country and can start handing out their pamphlets and starting their color revolution, or setting up some kind of opposition, if they like they do in most countries, out of the embassy. So another sign that the U.S. was getting ready to do something, the National Endowment for Democracy, the NGO that has always been involved in every country that the U.S. is trying to put in a bad light and attempt a regime change for, Iran, Hong Kong, China, the Koreas, it's always the NED, Ukraine. So at this time in June, there were 3 candidates that were being peddled. The first, and I can't pronounce these names, so I'm going to skip them, but they're going to be in the articles that I sent. The first was, he's a YouTube vlogger who became like the online personality for the slipper movement. He has since been removed from the election. I think he was arrested for having like $900,000 in his house. So of course the strongman Lukashenko, or Lucas, whatever his name is, Lukashenko, went after him, of course, as he does any opponent. Again, he is a strongman, so the elections are not open elections. No one's saying that. The second candidate, it was the former head of the Russian oil company Gazprom, the bank for that company, and this candidate seems to be Russia's candidate. Again, he's been since removed, I think, on fraud charges. And then the third was the former Belarus ambassador to the United States, and that seems to be the U.S. choice. He's also dropped out since then. So now what we have now is a new candidate, the wife of one of these former candidates that's being peddled as the opposition candidate. So now that the election's taking place, if you go on YouTube or you go on Twitter, you'll see, or you go on WashingtonPost.com or anything, you'll start seeing the videos of the tanks in the streets and the tear gas and everything, the horrible backlash that people are going through. But of course, it's organized, and the opposition lady is out there saying that we will not stand for these elections. And our numbers show that we won the election, and now there's protests of tens of thousands of people in strategic cities throughout the country. There was also the U.S. Media jumped on this whole thing to kind of bring Russia in this bad light, because again, you have to remember the relationship between Belarus and Russia is also strained. So the U.S. can use that to kind of push the country away from Russia. So there was a story that came out that the Belarusian government has detained up to 30 Russians who were there to start riots. Now the real story has come out that these Russians were not hired to start riots. They were hired by what they thought was a Russian oil company to protect oil fields in Syria and in Venezuela. And what had happened is, and there's an article I'll link to that breaks all this down, they were waiting for a flight in Minsk to go to Turkey, and the flight was canceled, and they were told to go wait in a hotel. And then while they were in the hotel, Lukashenko was told that there's these Russian agitators here, and he arrested them. So the story had already got ahead of itself, and so that's the story that you're going to see in the news, but the truth is otherwise. So again, that's going to be it, but I just wanted to give you a little backstory. Belarus, a country no one really knew about or paid attention to, is going to be, you're going to start seeing it pop up in the Washington Post and the New York Times, and I'm sure Anderson Cooper will cover it, and this will be the face of the next, like Ukraine was, the next Netflix documentary of people just fighting for their freedom, and any talk of anything I'm talking about will be seen as some kind of crazy Russian conspiracy. So, Belarus, pay attention to that. Check out the links that I'm going to provide, and that's going to be it for today. Again, I'll pop on periodically when I think there's something that I think everybody needs to be at least aware of, so they can't be tricked by the propaganda. But right now everybody's still just fighting about COVID and this cultural war going on in America. I personally have kind of detached from that, and I'm focused on buying land, starting a family, and growing, not living in this constant state of fear. But when I see things like this is what I like to pop out on. So you're living in history. So in 10 years, when there was the Belarusian, Belarusian civil war, we know where it started. So that's going to be it. Again, this has been Inigo, and I'll talk to you guys later.